gonna steal all side, ride me, baby. I ain't never gonna stop. Come on now, baby. Ride me straight to the top. Yeah, straight to the top.
Oh, you weren't recording it? Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's
One,
fixing the
one,
tango.
2, 3, clapping.
Giving a fixing
Yeah,
of a
clapping,
tango.
and now we're in. So you were just saying that Eddie Bravo, when he talks about conspiracy stuff, is you just got to look into it, man. You just got to look into it.
He seems like he's one of those guys, you know, because he'll be like, "Oh, I got facts," or "I got whatever," but like, as soon as you're not convinced by his facts, he's like, "Well, you just got to look into it, man. Like, there's so much out there. I can't even tell you the whole scope of it." And it's like, well, of course, because you don't fucking understand it.
You got to really be careful about the rabbit hole when it comes to looking things up on the internet and YouTube videos and like websites. Anybody can buy a domain and anybody can post whatever the fuck they want to put on the internet, and that doesn't make it a fact.
Badger in the rabbit hole.
Yeah. But
This is Bad Ideas, Good Stories number 16.
yes, declassifying an empire is what I'm liking.
Shit,
Yeah,
Declassifying an empire.
well, right.
You've entered the conspiracy zone.
You have entered the conspiracy zone. You're being lied to, and I really believe in that. But that being said, you kind of need to source your shit. There's conspiracies. I told actually our buddy Rich one time, I'm like, a conspiracy theory is only a conspiracy theory until you have the evidence, and then it's actually just a conspiracy. It's a fact, you know. And without that evidence, anybody could say whatever they want, right?
Yeah,
And
I think people, when they hear conspiracy, they like, oh, like a made up story, and you're like, no, like conspiracies happen all the time.
It's
There's
a real thing.
Constant conspiracies to undermine governments in other places or in our own, or undermine us through the media.
Yeah.
There's plenty of conspiracies, but the conspiracy theories often are crazy and easily debunked.
Well, and part of that conspiracy, which is another element that's going on right now, is let's say there's legitimate information, and then there's an organization that intentionally dumps disinformation on top of the legitimate
like the
stuff.
GRU,
I don't know the GRU.
the present day KGB.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's what they do.
And
That's
the
what
CIA,
they do.
which
Yeah.
is why,
Yeah, well,
which
they
is
both
what
got their troll farms.
I
yeah.
wanted to put today to our episode today, dedicated to declassifying a lot of the shit that the U.S. government specifically has done over the last 50, 60 years to really undermine the psychological direction of the North American public. You know, I wanted to write a book about it, but it got so daunting and it's such a monumental task. I just kind of have all these notes and these ideas floating around. But basically the premise of what I wanted to write was that the population of North America is the victim of about 70 years of psychological warfare, psyops, and control via choreographed psychological manipulation. Now, and I really believe that elements of hypnosis come into it and stuff like that. Now, it sounds out there, but there is sourced information out there that people can find if they want to do legitimate research, not wackadoo research, legitimate research that can back up this hypothesis.
Well, and I think lots of the crazy stuff, there's one or two examples of it from history where you can be like, well, no, there was a time where they put one of them 1,000 cycle tones through the TV and it fucked with people, and you know, and they go, well, yeah, but they don't do that now, and you're like, well, okay, maybe that was the rough draft, and then they figured out how to do it more subtly and subvertly, and they are currently doing it all the time, and you just don't know it because they fine tune it, and you only seen little glimpses of it in public when they tried it out, and it didn't, you know, wasn't hidden well enough yet.
Well, and I think a lot of the stuff about like tones and like wah 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 wah, like what is that, the frog, the hypnotoad on like that way, wah rah rah. I think a lot of that might exist, but the stuff that we're talking about, or the stuff that I want to talk about, is so evident and it's so simple that it almost goes under the radar. You know what I mean? There's like one of the guys that I talk about a lot, who I think is a pivotal person involved in this, is a guy named Edward Bernays. He wrote the book Propaganda, and he was Sigmund Freud's nephew. And he took Sigmund Freud's ideas on psychoanalysis and he applied it to crowd psychology and mass psychology. And Sigmund Freud wrote about mass psychology. So he took the idea of advertising and selling, and he said, we no longer sell the product. We sell the emotional connection to the product. We sell what the product makes you feel like. And he starts playing with core psychological, I guess, drives in the human, animal, And he's no longer selling a product, he's selling you a dream. And and you are now buying toothpaste because it'll get you laid, or buying a car because it's going to afford you some social status. When you're not even selling the car, you're selling a brand name.
Yeah.
And that is
you're selling toughness and strength of this vehicle that's
whatever.
compared to some of its foreign competitors is inadequate. And it's not stronger, it's not better, but it's
or I'm going to be a better mom if
I
I have this safer vehicle, because if I don't have this vehicle, I'm a bad mom.
Yeah.
Like that's fucking with your psychology in order to get you to accept a premise that may not actually be true. And I think the facts are going to show that the government and agencies do this in like your freedom. They've replaced the word freedom with capitalism, or capitalism with the word freedom. You want freedom, you want liberty, you want the right to have your way of life. You need to participate in consumer culture. And if you're not participating in consumer culture, you must be a communist. And is there any engagement on why communism is even bad? Or what socialism is versus communism? So this psychology,
what true freedom looks like when it's like, no, we told you what this is. You're free to make money however you think you can.
Pay rent. You're free to make money and pay rent within the confines of this.
Free to buy whatever you want if you can convince the bank that they can give you the money for it.
Pay taxes, and if you don't do those things, or if you do things without paying taxes, or going through the bank or any of that, you're a criminal, and therefore you are an immoral individual. And I think that's straight up psychological propaganda. If you don't fit into the system, you're a criminal, and if you're a criminal, you're immoral. So it's good versus evil. Law-abiding citizen is moral good individual.
Yeah.
Crime-committing citizen is a moral bad individual. It's that binary thinking, which is psychology and psychological warfare, in my opinion, 101, right? And I think that's been going on, and it's been, like you said, like they fine-tuned that stuff over the last however long to really play up that propaganda as being reality. You know what I mean? Think about it. When I was growing up, I was thinking about this the other day. I asked my mom, "Hey, that's a drugstore, but you told me drugs are bad," and she's like, "Well, those are good drugs." I'm like, "Why are those good drugs?" "Well, because a doctor says that these are good for you." Well, what if my grandma says drink this herbal tea, or my buddy says, "Hey, man, I relax by smoking this herb." Well, those are crimes. You know what I mean? You're not supposed to. You're not in a position to give me a prescription. So therefore, it's an illegal drug. Yeah, that herb you're smoking is an illegal drug. That mushroom you're taking is an illegal drug. So therefore, you're a drug user. Therefore, you're a bad individual. And that's straight up a narrative that's been pushed since the war on drugs. And the drugs won the war. The U.S. and Contras profited from the drug trade, at least the hard drug trade.
Well, and that's interesting to me, because in my mind, like, the stuff you're talking about is also links to the spiritual world in some different cultures, right? And depending on your level of spirituality, those psychedelics and stuff help you access that. So that's one way to control people from doing that, and making sure they're staying in the same control systems they have been, by going, no, you don't need to know about this other world that exists beneath all this, but that opens your eyes through that. Or when it's the hard drugs, like you're talking about with the Iran-Contra situation, well, that's a way to keep people sick. So you keep them sick, you keep them dependent, because they're not healthier when they're on those ones, right?
Well, and it's also interesting where, there's a TED Talk called War on Consciousness, where Buddy talks about the acceptable societal drugs being stimulants like caffeine or sugar or alcohol or tobacco, where you're a functional citizen if you do this little group of taxed and approved drugs that are lobbied and paid for, and politicians are getting their pockets lined by keeping them legal. But this group over here that makes you contemplative and question the nature of arbitrary rules and your role in society, these ones that really challenge societal standards, were criminalized. Why were they outlawed? And these ones are good, because these ones make you a functional citizen, and these ones can encourage you to be an individual with free thought.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that's a war on consciousness right there.
And why shouldn't a functional citizen be able to have free thought? Right? Because as soon as they do, it's like, well, no, I don't have to function in these fucking parameters to exist.
You recognize that they're arbitrary.
Yep.
And like this rule or this border, that's not real. What makes this part of the forest different than that part of the forest? Property, ownership. When you go back to those civilizations that were here before colonialism, they don't even recognize that. They're like, oh, it's getting cold, got to go move that direction. What's in that direction that's stopping me from moving? A river, a mountain? And that's about it. Yeah, exactly. That's about it. Or, maybe I'm going to somebody else's hunting ground, but that's like, let's negotiate and stuff like that. There aren't hard and fast rules like that. So yeah, I'm a fairly firm believer, I guess, over the last however many years that a system of capitalism or a government that is basically shills to support capitalist oligarchs is been using basic propaganda and psychological manipulation in order to create a population of livestock.
Right?
Yep.
Because that's what's profitable.
Yep. Yeah. We can tax them, we can milk them, we can shear them, and they think they're free as long as we give them enough room within the maze to navigate.
Yeah.
And they will never see outside the walls.
And have a few of them that can every once in a while. You know, because they're really good at a sport, or they're
If
really
they
good
get
at
rich
art.
enough.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And they can have a glimpse of that, and then you can still point to, well, you can do it. You can pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get up here. And
It's a carrot and a stick, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's really tough to pull yourself up by the bootstraps when you can't even afford boots.
oh shit,
Right? That's Jose told me that
That's
one. I
deep.
love that one. Yeah, and that's just it. There's a lot of people, you know. Yeah, go get some work boots and get on the job site. Well, what if I can't even get work boots? I can't even get to the job site. You know.
yeah. What if I can't tie laces?
And those people. Okay, so let's think about this one, right? Yeah, I've never been taught to tie laces. I've never had a role model to show me how to do this thing. So there's okay. So here's an example. I did an oil change with Buddy this weekend. He showed me how to do it on my truck, and I realized I never had a male role model to show me some fundamental masculine things that are part of what implicitly I think being a man is about. You know, basic maintenance on my vehicle, basic house upkeep, construction,
You
things
need to
like
look
that.
after your own shit.
Yeah, dude stuff.
Yeah.
Dude stuff. And there's a fundamental chunk of that life that's missing from me. And because I was never given those skills, that means I'll never be able to pass those skills to my kids and never be able to pass those. They'll never be able to pass those skills. So I'm increasingly going to be dependent on somebody else to do this for me. It's creating a mommy situation. Who's my parent that can help me with grown-up shit, right? As opposed to, being self-sufficient. And I think in any situation, the more that we give away our freedom and our liberty for babysitters, we're livestock. You know, where's our food coming from? Where's our safety coming from? Where's my babysitter, right? Because I no longer have the skills to handle my shit. Or even like a traumatized people, if I traumatize somebody, well, they're going to traumatize their children, and they're going to traumatize their children and never give them the opportunity to get out of it. Cool, that works really good. And what do? We give them drugs. We give them medicine. We just keep them addicted to this society, fast food and junk and whatever the escapism. We'll just keep them addicted, and they will never be self-sufficient and functional individuals, healed grown-ups, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's actually, it seems too big a coincidence to not be orchestrated. And I guess that's where the conspiracy stuff comes in. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because if you think of like just think about North American culture, and you talked about like people of wealth don't eat fucking McDonald's. Mm-mm. They don't eat KFC. They don't eat shit like that. They get somebody to make them something, and they may have a burger, but it's going to be much nicer quality and handmade and all that kind of shit, right?
If they're going to get fried chicken,
it's exactly.
It's going to be organic,
chicken,
free range, quality oil, quality spices,
right? So it's you're already and acting like that's what everybody does, when it's like, well, no, that's what everybody who's poor and sick does. Mm-hmm. Because if you had money, you'd pay somebody else to fucking feed you better food, or if you weren't already like so fucking run down and tired, and you'd make a lunch during the day, you wouldn't I'll just get a fucking burger later, like
it's fast. You're run so hard, you need convenience.
Yes, and so if you had a society full of people who had the ability to live like that, and then they weren't buying that, well, then all that disappears. There's no more fast food fucking places.
So it's kind of maintaining. They keep a system that maintains that system. Yeah. My partner, she pointed out in some areas they call them food deserts, or I think that's what it is, food deserts.
In inner cities and whatnot?
Inner cities where there is nowhere to get groceries, but there's Popeye's Chicken, there's KFC, there's Burger King, McDonald's, Taco Bell.
7-Eleven on every other corner.
7-Elevens.
Cheap pizza
and that's
shit.
where you can get your food. And how much do you think you're going to be getting fresh produce, quality ingredients or anything to make real food? No, all you have is a 7-Eleven down the street because there are no grocery stores. That's a desert, and it's keeping people coronary heart disease, diabetes, all this stuff. Well, what do they do then? They just draw off a medical system. In the States, a for-profit medical system. And so everything's profit. So you guys are suffering. How do you heal your suffering? Here's alcohol. Here's illicit drugs. Well, you get arrested for using an illicit drug and self-medicating. We're tossed in a for-profit prison system. Jesus Christ. Then you get out of the prison system and you forfeit your right to vote because you're a felon. You know what I mean? Or you're in a situation where you have no jobs, you have no way to make money. How are you going to feed yourself and your family you get into some sort of illicit stuff, whether it's drug dealing or prostitution or whatever it is, because that's the only way to make money in these environments. It's a crime, you know?
Yeah.
So they
You
criminalize
can't get a
survival.
part-time job at the grocery store because there isn't one.
Yeah, they make it hard to survive, and then they criminalize survival. You know, it's kind of a weird one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 specific operations or projects that I want to discuss from American history that spanned from 1945 to 1995, which is kind of interesting. That basically the U.S. government literally sanctioned in order to establish a system of underlying coercion and manipulation of the American public, which also carries over to culture, because you can't deny that we were indoctrinated by American culture growing up, you know, whether it's through Hollywood or music or anything else that we grew up in. The percentage of Canadian artists and films I watched versus, you know, or that
Beachcombers, Littlest Hobo.
Yeah, it really didn't compare to anything coming out of the States.
Yeah, I mean, it was far above beyond better. That's why it doesn't compare. Littlest Hobo, classic television. That dog flew a helicopter. The one
The
episode.
Canadian lassie.
Yeah, yeah, badassy.
Okay, so
What?
badassy. Amazon Prime has a show right now with Al Pacino called Hunters. Have you seen this at all? It's
I've seen previews for it. I've not watched it.
It's a good show. It's a good show, and it's a fictional show about a group of Holocaust survivors that hunt down Nazis living in hiding in the U.S. and kill them for their crimes. They're vigilante, you know, anti-fascist group. Okay, and they came under scrutiny, or not scrutiny, criticism, because they fabricated elements of things that happened in the death camps. Literally, they fabricated, you know, people being used as chess pieces and executed and stuff like that. When there's enough atrocity in those death camps,
yeah,
you
that was the issue they had.
yeah, then, well, you don't need to fabricate the atrocities of the death camps. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I guess.
So you don't need to make Nazis bigger cartoon villains than what they really fucking did, because what they really did was evil, and when you make them a cartoon, you kind of minimize the real evil that they fucking did. So that's when they came under scrutiny. It's like, you don't need to fucking make up the shit the Nazis did. The Nazis did enough evil shit that if you say what really happened, that's way worse than your, you know, storyline comic book version of the bad guy Nazi, right? So this show, they talk about Operation Paperclip. And Operation Paperclip is a legitimate U.S. government operation operated from 1945 to 1959. When the Operation of Strategic Services wanted to expand their weapons program against the USSR. They rounded up 1,600 German scientists and brought them to the USA to work in the fields of rocket science and chemistry.
Not Nazi scientists.
Well, hold on. German scientists to work in the fields of rocket science. NASA was largely a lot of Nazi or non-Germans, right off the bat. And chemistry, weapons development, human psychology, and interrogation, right? So President Harry Truman at the time said he didn't want any full-on Nazis as part of this program. So the people in charge of the program, they expunged and redacted records of Nazis and war criminals in order to say, oh, they're just scientists hired by the Germans during World War II and brought them over. There's rumors, and this is one of like those rumors, so this is not substantiated, that even Joseph Mengele was doing remote research from Argentina. And they've proven that they found Joseph Mengele, the angel of death, the head doctor of Auschwitz, in Argentina when he died, and he had lived out his life till a ripe old age and died of natural causes in Argentina. So, yeah, that's Operation Paperclip. Yeah. They brought a lot
of... Werner Braun was the guy who created the V2 rocket.
I've heard the name. Yeah, he was a big NASA guy. Yes. NASA.
Yes, well,
calling it NASA.
But he was also a big Nazi guy.
that NASA.
Yeah. Yeah, they say he's the reason that they got to the moon.
Mm-hmm. And he was a Nazi? He was an SS officer?
From what I don't know if he was an officer, but I know I've seen documentaries with pictures of him with officers.
And that's Werner Braun. In case people want to look this up.
Yeah.
This entire episode is going to be, look it up.
Yeah, please fact check and double check, because, the dates are going to be off and the names are going to be mispronounced, but the general story is still going to be relatively accurate.
Yeah. So the USA would have never gotten to the moon if it wasn't,
or not as quickly, or not before the Russians, maybe, but...
or film that convincing evidence. No, just joking. We're not going to go to there.
Conspiracy,
whether the moon landing happened or not. But, they say say that NASA was very much ex-German,
Yep. Well, and the
paper.
Argentinian thing, the angle as well. Like, I mean, there've been reports of German U-boats off the coast of Argentina immediately after World War II. And like, I went to Argentina. Oh, fuck, I don't know what it was, 10 years ago now or
Really?
so. And we went to this little town called Pinamar, and that was one of the spots where they'd seen these Nazi U-boats right after World War II. And it was funny because we got down there. Almost nobody outside of Buenos Aires was like fluent in English, and very few people in the rural areas were speaking it at all. And the only person we found that was like running a little hotel there that spoke English was a German woman, and who, of course, spoke German and broken English, and mentioned there was more than a few German people around. And I was like, oh, Relo.
Yeah, there's lots
this
of
checks out, eh?
lots. The Mossad have found ex-Nazis and executed them and brought them back to Israel for
shit.
in Argentina.
Yeah.
They did escape. A lot of the upper echelon escaped to Argentina, and they've been found found their graves when these guys had died.
Well, and there was talk like that was even all because they'd set up bases during World War II in South America. The Nazis did. And like before the end of the war, they went over there and started secretly setting up bases.
Well, and they're in cahoots with the people in charge there. They're giving them
with some of
gold
the more despot leaders that were down there. And I think part of it was also to eventually end up like in Antarctica, and possibly
I've heard about
build a
that,
base there. Well, and that kind of ties in with one of mine is the story of Admiral Byrd and Operation High Jump, which was 1947, and the story behind. Okay, so Admiral Byrd was an American admiral and what do you call it? Adventurer, I guess. He'd flown over the North Pole and the South Pole. And one of the big stories about him is, or that supposedly did come out in his diary, was that on one of his excursions over the North Pole, that he had kind of a Bermuda Triangle sort of experience where he's flying, and then all of a sudden his controls aren't working properly, like his gauges aren't working, and then he kind of goes over a bit of a mountain range, and then there's green space all underneath him, and he's all like, what the fuck, I'm in the North Pole. And then he starts seeing like dinosaurs and shit. So, and he's like, well, where am I? And then he's kind of pulling into an opening that goes into the earth, and he's got no control over his plane anymore. It's like there's a tractor beam or some shit. So he gets pulled inside to the inner earth to this land of
This is
Agartha.
fictional?
This is supposedly this gentleman's diary and like a real admiral. But hold on, Matt, because it's twofold on this. So this is the mission he's doing where he's supposed to fly over the North Pole and just survey it or whatever.
North or south?
This is the North Pole.
Okay.
So and then he ends up going into this fucking opening into the inner earth, and there's a secondary sun in there, and there's these beings that I believe were even the Aryan people that supposedly. That was one of the groups that when the Nazis were talking about Aryans, it wasn't necessarily like a pure blood white race of humans. It was possibly a supernatural race of some sort that could very well, because this is kind of the fucking weird where this thing gets even weirder too. So supposedly he meets these beings, and the one of the theories is that they were us, but they'd gone to the inner earth during cataclysms previously. So say we've had civilizations that have been wiped out 6 or 7 times through fucking different ice ages and hit by whatever, and whatever killed the dinosaurs. Say we were around before then. There was a group of people that were living in the inner earth the whole time, surviving all these, so continuing with their own technology and whatnot, just not on the surface because they weren't getting wiped out every fucking 12,000 years or whatever. So anyways, these are supposedly the beings that he meets with.
Alien dinosaur breeding Nazi predecessors.
No, he called them the Nordics because they were tall and blonde.
Okay.
And very eloquent speaking, but also very powerful and had this technology and shit. And basically they told him, they're like, we've been keeping an eye on shit, and now you guys got nukes. We got to tone her down here, because this is our Earth also. Like we live in here, so we do have a vested interest. We don't try to come out and fuck around with stuff on the surface, but World War II is just happening. You guys got fucking Hiroshima just went down. Like, you need to know that we exist here. And that supposedly the Nazis had found out about this through different occult writings and shit like that, and been searching for the same thing, and possibly even had contact with them, because that's one of the theories as to why they supposedly were more technologically advanced in a lot of ways, especially with shit like rockets, was because they had contact with some beings that maybe gave them a bit of a fucking a step up, right? And so anyways, so Byrd has this fucking experience with these guys, and they ship him back out, and he flies back, and he goes back to his headquarters and reports. And they fucking drag him into this little room, do the whole debrief kind of thing. This didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. But we still want to know what you saw. So he tells them. Well, then eventually they have him do another expedition, this time to the South Pole. And because he was told that there was two openings, there's one in the north and one in the south, and then it was hollow. So then and again, the only reason that it hadn't been discovered is because they were on the tips of the earth, and until this time we weren't flying over them, so you couldn't. Nobody was getting to the North and South Pole before the early 40s, with easily, or as easy as we can now. And that when it had a kind of Bermuda Triangle effect, even if you did have technology to get there, it'd still fuck up and you couldn't figure out where you were and kind of find it. Any fucking ways. So they do this expedition down there, and they'd heard, I don't know if they'd heard that the Nazis were there, but they ended up having contact with these crafts that did have swastikas on them
by his account.
This is like there's battleships, there's cruisers, there's aircraft with him.
By his account.
This is the account of they didn't say exactly specifically that this was some sort of technologically advanced thing, but they had a skirmish with some sort of either Nazis or somebody else at the South Pole as they were getting down to Antarctica, and like they were decimated. Destroyers were sunk and aircraft was wiped out with what sounded like heat beams or laser fucking beams. So it was some sort of technological advancement that they had that the Americans didn't have, and it gave them a real fucking hard time. So anyways, and that was kind of the end of that, because of course he wasn't allowed to talk about any of it throughout his career, and then he died and somebody found his diary of him documenting this and what happened. That's the story of Admiral Byrd and the Inner Earth.
Admiral Byrd and the Inner Earth. Okay, so I'm a bit of a because of my history and my interests, I'm a bit of a, what would you call it? A fan, a researcher of the occult roots of Nazism. You know what I mean? Yeah. And a lot of that stuff, like even before they were a political party, even before that stuff ever came about, they were founded on a couple societies, the Thule Society and the Vril Society. Vril is basically the German interpretation of prana, the Hindu prana energy, or of ki, the Japanese ki, or the Chinese chi, or what New Agers call energy, right? And the Vril Society was dedicated to, the Vril specifically, Vril Society was dedicated to manifesting Vril energy within the individual psychic abilities, what the Hindus would call siddhis or sacred spiritual power, right? And a lot of this stuff had to do with Himmler's SS had full-on divisions dedicated to going to Nepal and Tibet and trying to study as much of the history of the roots of the Aryan people. Now you got to keep in mind the Aryan people. This was an Indo-Aryan race moved from the Caucasus Mountains down to Iranian area, and then they moved from the Iranian area into India, what's India now, and they brought the earliest spiritual texts, which would be the Rig Veda, where they were already talking about a culture that existed that had chariots and they had god worship. It was like the first organized religion that came down was from the Aryan people. So the old school Brahmins in the Hindu caste system, you have the Brahmins and you've got the merchant castes, and then you've got like the untouchable castes, and you've got the warrior castes. The Brahmins were like the holy men. They were the top, and they justified their hierarchy as being spiritually superior because they were descendants of the Aryans. Then the Aryans were supposedly this race of spiritually, intellectually superior high people that came down with the rumors say light skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair from the Caucasus Mountains, where the term Caucasian comes from. Now when we're incorporating the spiritual knowledge that these people brought into Iran and into India, this is what the original Aryans were supposed to be. So even if you go to India nowadays and you talk to the people from the Brahmin castes, because there still is caste systems in India, these people are like, oh, we're descended of the Aryans. So we therefore have a hierarchy, and we're a spiritually elevated people. By being born into the Brahmin caste, that means you've got a spiritual, you have the proclivity for spiritual truth more than you lowly materialist people. So the lady named Helena Blavatsky went, and she studied in Tibet, she studied in India, she studied all this stuff. She's a person who actually wrote down a lot of the first European introduction to Eastern philosophy, and she founded the Theosophy Society, and she's the one, including a few other people, that really brought this idea of superiority, natural inclination of the highest people versus the lowest people towards on an esoteric level, to the precursor organizations, the Thule Society and the Vril Society, that were to found the National Socialist German Workers' Party. So these were occult spiritual organizations and fraternities that used to meet in beer halls that all of a sudden started supporting certain political movements. So these guys kind of moved that spiritual teaching into what became the Nazi Party. And they believed that through their research, they started believing in that the Aryan people were actually survivors of Atlantis. So there's a guy named Robert Seffer on YouTube. You can look his videos up. He does a ton of research on this stuff, on the Atlantean civilization, that the deluge came, Atlantis fell, the swastika got decimated all around the planet, and that's where the original Aryans came from. And they also believe...
Well, that's that myth of numerous times having us all wiped out, and this group somehow found a way to still exist.
Yeah, the deluge myth, the Great Flood, it's around the world, right? So I looked into this stuff, I watched a lot of it, I've read, there's a couple books, there's... Jesus, obviously the occult roots of Nazism is an academic study, a non-biased academic. It's not pro-Nazi, but he tells you about the history of Nazism. There's another one called, I think, The Black Sun, written by the same author, and he just goes through all the esoteric roots of Nazism. So,
well, and sorry, I just want to say too, what I find interesting about all that, it was they looked at all of these occult and hidden things, but to try and find the actual real power in them. It was without the mythology and everything attached to it, they took it and then, okay, well, what is this energy? What is the real? What is the chi or whatever?
Prana,
right?
yeah.
How do we figure out, how do we scientifically manifest that and control it? That seemed like that was the angle with it, because even shit right when World War II started, they said they had a couple Nazis positioned right by where the Spear of Destiny was being held.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh yeah.
So that as soon as the war started, they just took their jackets off and had their Nazi uniforms on. And were like, "This is ours." Mm-hmm. And that way, everybody's like, "What do you mean? They're in this museum, you know?" So there was these different artifacts that they really felt for most people would just be a spiritual, cultural significance, but it was they were getting because well, no. There's something to this. It's not just that this thing exists. Maybe it vibrates at a certain frequency, or it's some sort of radioactivity, or who knows what the fuck it is. But there's something scientific to this. We got to figure out what that is.
Yeah, there's
how do we make it the fly? Even the bell, the glockenspiel or whatever the fuck it's called. That was supposedly Indian teachings of the Vimanas, the flying machines. Yeah. That's what helped them to create that. So they built a flying saucer supposedly from ancient religious texts.
Well, that's what they were basing it on, I think. Well, and the Rig Veda, that's the first book that the Aryans brought down into Iran and India. It talks about a clash between gods, and they use flying vehicles with massive explosions that turn the sand into glass and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what they took a lot of inspiration from. And whether they tried to meld that, Himmler was in charge of a specific, I forget the name of it, a specific subset of the Nazis, which was dedicated exclusively for a Nazi spirituality. So the people like to say, "Oh, they were Christian." No, they weren't. They were trying to revive pre-colonial, pre-Christian religion.
Well, it was they were taking a little bit of everything, and whatever worked for them, that's what they were going to use.
Yeah, they used the trappings of Roman imagery, with the big standards and the eagles and the salutes and stuff like that.
Vikings as well. They tied into that.
That's where the runes came from. They were
the
trying
lineage of it. Hey, you're if you look at the real lineage of it, it's neither of those things. But it's well, yeah, but it's attractive imagery for us to use to build a mythology that we can create a new fucking.
Well, there was some roots to that stuff, but yeah, they were fabricating a lot and taking a little from here and a little from there. And there was a huge gap between what they were talking about, between what Blavatsky was saying. Well, Blavatsky was a racist. She believed in racial hierarchies the same way that the Hindus believed in the caste system between the noble born and the subhuman born. But the Nazis ran with it. You got a mic problem there?
Gotta stay the same.
Okay, fine.
So the Nazis ran with it, and they said if the Aryans over there were supposed to be blonde hair and blue eyed, and we're blonde haired and blue eyed, we're Aryan. right? And that's their. So they believe that not only did these original people
they cherry picked what fit.
Well, they believe not only did these original people go south to Iran and to India, but they also moved north up to Scandinavia and to Europe, and that's where the roots came from. So the quote unquote white races were descended and had a closer link to these noble people than those that went to the other people. So that's the occult roots, or the histories of the Nazis. So the Society of Vril, I went down the rabbit hole. I watched his Robert Seffer's videos on YouTube, and I ordered one of his books called The Secret of Vril. And I looked it up, and there's a ton of really interesting information in there. But, of course, I wanted to look up the sources of where he's getting his stuff from. And one of them was The Black Sun by Peter Moon. And it's the Montauk's Nazi-Tibetan connection. I thought maybe they'd be talking about, going to Tibet and what the Nazis were actually looking for. But man, this guy's a fucking whack job. I started going through it, and he's talking about in New York, Montauk, New York, there's like a secret base where all of the UFOs are coming, and they're doing
like the Montauk Project.
Okay, the Montauk Manhattan Project.
That's kind of what even that TV show Stranger Things is kind of loosely based on the Montauk Project.
So I wrote off the whole thing. I can't take The Secret of Vril as being legitimate if he's sourcing this book is written by another whack job, and that's my opinion on this. I'm willing to consider it as a hypothesis, but until you have source proof, I have to say, okay, it's a theory or a hypothesis, and once it's a conspiracy theory versus a conspiracy fact. And that's my angle with a lot of the inner Earth or flat Earth or any of that stuff, right? Because it's all that's the rabbit hole. It's a slippery slope.
Well, and it's one to also dismiss away because you're like, well, it's such a big conspiracy, that's why you don't know about it. You know what I mean? It's like, well, no, if there was beings living inside the earth, of course they'd hide it, and you'd never know, and there'd be little things, but then it's also like, yeah, but maybe it's just bullshit too.
Well, it's like people do DMT and they all come back and they've got very similar experiences. Does that make it factual? Like, the anecdotal evidence is lowest common, or is the lowest state of scientific research. I felt this. I experienced this. Well, your experience and feelings could be flawed. Now, if 100 people all feel the same thing, well, it starts being a little bit more evidence-based. But if 1,000 do it and only 100 feel the similar thing, then 900, they basically cancel out the experience of that 100. And that it's a tragedy, but that's just the way, I guess, scientific experiments work, right? Without that factual source, you're not going to, at least for me, I won't follow a theory without that proper sourcing. And living in the era of Facebook right now, we need to source our shit, right? Because otherwise, the pedophile conspiracies are everywhere, and everybody's behind every fucking corner, and QAnon is legitimate. Speaking of
behind corners, there's a good one. This is kind of in the news right now. I don't know if you're familiar with like Jerry Falwell or Jerry Falwell Jr. I don't know if you hear what's going on with him.
He's a televangelist, right?
Yes, sir.
I remember hearing about him all in the 80s.
Evangelicals. Yes, so this is his son, Jerry Falwell Jr., and he's attached to this Liberty University, which is like this crazy Christian right-wing university, and they got like in their charter or whatever, like, if you're a member of this university, you can't engage in any sort of sexual relationship with anybody outside of marriage, and marriage is between a physically born woman and a physically born man.
They're going
some
there,
bullshit like that. Yeah, like they get really
biological,
really fine-tuning what their vision of the fucking world
have
should
to
be.
In 2020, right?
Fuck. So, anyways, he's been attached to this university for a while. I mean, he's still an evangelical, and it just came out recently that him and his wife had been having like an affair, like legitimately, with the pool boy.
Okay, I saw that,
and
I wasn't sure if it was legitimate or not.
No, okay, this is a doozy, man.
It's legitimate.
Hold on. So this information comes out recently, where it comes out the information of this affair, but nobody really knows for sure what it is or what the parameters are. And right away, Falwell starts to saying, "Oh, this guy tried blackmailing me and my wife." And so then more of the information starts to come out, and then he backpedals on that and says, "Oh no, I wasn't being blackmailed. I wasn't being blackmailed." Well, what it turns out was that fucking 10 years ago or something like that, Falwell and his wife are at this hotel, and she's making eyes at the pool boy and ends up picking him up and then telling him, like, my husband just likes to watch, and so goes back there and literally cuckolds this man.
Nice.
And which makes me fucking laugh out loud, because that's something the right has been saying for the longest goddamn
you're a cuck.
Everybody's a cuck. You're a cuck. And it's like, fuck, you guys are literally the definition of that. But you're going to point fingers.
You're
and
literally
names.
watching your wife get fucked by other dudes.
And I'm talking about like he's in the room sometimes. He's peeking like literally through a crack in the door sometimes. Like it's an ongoing thing. And
so it was like an affair kind of deal,
yes.
or just like...
and he's 20 years old at the time when this starts, you know, and they're adults, like they're
the pool boy.
The pool boy's
Okay,
20
yeah.
years old, right? Well, and again, like it even gets him kind of drunk the first time, and the drinking age down there's 21, and I'm like, Jesus, like this is getting greasy. So, anyways, they start to develop this relationship and like a professional relationship, so they can say like, oh well, he's our partner and that's the reason why he's with us on vacations, or he's hanging out at the house with us and shit like that. So they get him tied up with whatever Faldwell's business is, probably some sort of fucking scam ripping people off, and
Jesus for money,
and keeps him on. So then they kind of like they groomed him, you know, and the entire time I'm thinking like, if this is a couple of power that runs a fucking like is involved with a school with children of the same age as this guy, and this is a young lady that this is happening to, like this is unfucking reasonable, right?
There's a ridiculous amount
and
of
even with the
double
guy,
standard.
it's kind of like, well, I mean, whatever. But at the same time, the way it was described was like, well, no, they were grooming him and they were trying to keep him complacent and quiet, and they knew that he would do what he was told, right? So it keeps going on for just about 10 years. They have this relationship back and forth, and
so he was a sugar baby and like a
kind
sugar
of,
daddy
kind
and
of,
mommy
yeah,
relationship.
Yeah, like he was. Yeah, he'd go on vacation with him, shit. Like I said,
They probably
So,
set him up with an apartment or whatever and a job.
there was lots of that kind of shit
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on, right? And so eventually, this information was about to come out. Well, and this is where it gets funny to me. So right away, when it came out just recently, like within weeks, Falwell says, "Oh, this guy was trying to fucking blackmail me." Well, then more information comes out, and Michael Cohen, the president's lawyer, had admitted in court that he had suppressed photos that were embarrassing to Jerry Falwell Jr. That had to do with this pool boy. So I assume that there's some
Suddenly?
pictures. This was right before Trump was running for president.
Okay.
The first evangelical to endorse Donald Trump before anybody else was doing it was this gentleman.
Fuck off.
So here's where the blackmail was. Michael fucking Cohen and the president blackmailed him with this 4 years ago to get him to be their evangelical fucking voice, and it stayed quiet this whole time, and now it just came out. And like there's pictures of Trump shaking hands with the pool boy and Falwell standing there staring at their hands like, oh yeah, these guys own me. And so now and I don't think there's a lot of, because I've heard these together and I'm like, well, isn't that what fucking happened? I haven't heard anybody come out and say it. Oh yeah, the president's the one that blackmailed him. But as soon as I heard all that, I'm like, well, that's what happened. Like, and of
How did
course,
it not?
And of course, that's what this guy would do, because he knows the information is going to come out. He knows blackmail is going to be involved. So the first thing he says was, oh, he tried blackmailing me. So now when you hear about this 2 months from now, and somebody says, oh, I think it was the president, and you go, ah, no, it was the fucking pool boy. He said it was the pool boy to be. Oh, now you're trying to say the president has something to fucking do with this? He doesn't even know him. Well, there's 50 pictures of them together and shaking hands with the pool boy. So what? He shakes hands with lots of, you know, like that's the
their
whole you
angle
get
that
into,
they
right?
go
So that's
in.
why you muddy it right off the bat. And that's what they're fucking doing. So he's going through this right now. And yeah, I think it's absolutely hilarious because, again, there's just more criminal shit from these criminals.
Well, we watched that House of Cards. You know, the fact that Kevin Spacey's in it's neither here nor there.
So it's perfect, actually.
Yeah, right?
It makes sense.
But so much of that series is about what the hustling that goes on behind the scenes, where it's like bribery and corruption and, you know, lobbying and blackmail. It's like, man, you got drunk and you smashed into some people, and we've got pictures of you with this prostitute, and you know you're either going to vote for this legislation or that stuff's coming out.
Yeah.
That's not politics. That's control.
Yeah.
It's all control.
And that's not all fucking drama. Like, that's real. That's they're not just making up stories at that point.
No,
you know,
it's
like-
actual. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like a historical fiction in the House
Yeah,
of Cards.
exactly. Yeah. You don't, maybe the names aren't the same, but the situations all
Exactly.
fucking
Where do we get
happen
the inspiration for
numerous
this?
times over and over and over again. Yeah, so it's gonna be rough for them because, again, like it's gonna open up more and more and more.
Yeah.
More of these wounds will get picked at. Hey.
Well, picking at wounds, I'll get back on track. Operation Paperclip, Nazis in America. These guys, the USA, the government, the CIA, they wanted to develop a truth serum. And they wanted to come up with something they could just inject somebody, and they couldn't deny any falsehood, right? And they failed. But to do this, they employed a guy by the name of Sidney Gottlieb, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who had the name the Black Sorcerer, and he was a chemist who was a specialist in poison.
The Black Sorcerer.
Black Sorcerer. So this guy went on to help establish a program called MK Ultra. Now, and the MK Ultra was also known by MK Naomi, MK Delta. It operated from 1953 to 1973, 20 years. And during this time, they did 162 illegal and legal experiments with 185 researchers on campuses, hospitals, prisons, all around the U.S. and Canada. And the written goal for the MK Ultra was to develop techniques that enhanced ability to withstand privation, torture, or coercion, as well as produce shock, amnesia, and confusion in subjects. They wanted to investigate mind control by inducing altered states of consciousness with or without the use of drugs. And in 1955, the program stated that they sought to promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where a recipient would be discredited in public, and wiping the first mind and inserting a new mind in the void that was left.
Oh, shit.
This is coming from the declassified documents, right?
Inserting a new mind.
Yeah, completely reprogramming.
I'd like to learn how to do that. There's a few people who I'd like to reprogram their minds for them.
Well, this is the interesting thing, because the more I go down the rabbit hole with this stuff, especially with my hypnosis certification, I'm like, all of this stuff is not unreasonable. I've hypnotized people. I've had them like forget stuff. I had one of my friends that I practice with forget the number 3. The number 3. We're just fucking around, and it's like the number 3 is now gone. I've got video of it. You know, I'm like, how many emails have I missed? And there's 333. She's like, you know, it's like, yeah, completely forgot number 3. So yeah, exactly. There's all kinds of post hypnotic suggestions that you can implant in people that they will remember that they don't remember them being there, but when they get a cue, all of a sudden this stuff kicks in, right? So MK Ultra, utilizing drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, repeated mantras, electroshock, and polygraph, was used to induce altered memories and amnesia. And Gottlieb targeted those that could, this is a quote from their declassified documents, those that could not fight back, drug addicts, prisoners, mental patients, terminal cancer patients, and paid unwitting students. The results from the MK Ultra experiments included amnesia, paralysis, withdrawal, confusion, insomnia, dissociative identities, schizophrenia-like symptoms, and suicides. Yep. And in 1973, after Watergate cracked, in fear of scrutiny, Gerald Ford ordered all of the MK Ultra files destroyed, and the program was halted. But they misfiled a shit ton of documents in the Department of Treasury as opposed to where they were supposed to be, and they were found. So 8,000 were released exposing the project, and after an ethics hearing later in 1973, 20,000 other files were declassified, resulting in several lawsuits filed against the CIA because what they were doing was profoundly illegal. Yeah. So that's basically MK Ultra. And we talked about in one of the previous episodes about the hypnotist, Darren Brown. If you look up Darren Brown, the assassin with Stephen Fry, that's him going through, it's a 45-minute episode on YouTube, and he goes through, as a hypnotist, how he can find the most hypnotically susceptible person and basically run them through hypnosis only, no drugs, and assassinate a stranger. And they say that there's been a number of assassins, like Sirhan, who killed Robert Kennedy. He claimed he had no memory of what happened. Now, of course, it's easy to say, oh, I don't remember it. But he insisted the entire time that like he had been a victim of hypnosis and he had no clue about ever assassinating somebody. So they call that the Manchurian Candidate. It was one of the other subsets of the MK Ultra program, is that they wanted to be able to make an assassin that you call up on the phone, you give like a few different cues, and all of a sudden this person goes and gets their rifle and goes and does stuff. And basically creating those sleeper cells and soldiers in hiding, right? So yeah, that's the MK Ultra program. And it goes on to other stuff, but yeah. Have you ever heard any about that?
Oh yeah, MK Ultra, absolutely. And yeah, specifically with Robert Kennedy and possibly with JFK as well. And
JFK.
Really? That perhaps. Well, I mean, there's layers and layers with that, right? Is to
the mob,
Jack Ruby coming in and shooting Oswald, and then him fucking dying right away. But yeah, the idea that it was either he was triggered in some way, or obviously the multiple shooter one. I was just listening to a thing about this the other day, actually, because they were talking to a guy who was one of the guys on security detail outside the car. And he was like, no, he was dead. He's like, if anybody thinks that they faked it or whatever, he's like, that his head was wide open. Like, so that was the one takeaway from that. He's like, other than that, he's like, I don't know. He's like, it seemed like it was more than one bullet to me.
The second shooter.
And he said just because of how it was, he says it didn't seem like it was one shooter to me. It had to be a couple bullets. And
well, just do the math. All of a sudden, you've got somebody who assassinates a president, and out of the blue, a mob guy comes and gut shots him when he first gets. So an organized criminal, kills the guy who assassinates the president and covers up any reason why that would have happened. And they'll, that's there's too many weird little angles on that one.
Yeah, and he died of cancer, I think, within 10 months after that while he was in prison.
Interestingly enough, CIA apparently developed a serum or a pin that you could put on the end of a pin, and when you get attacked and you get poked by it, it's a cancer inducing.
Shit.
Yeah, and I've heard there's been assassinations with cancer inducing from that. They tried all kinds of stuff. If you looked up all the assassinations against attempts against Fidel Castro in Cuba,
exactly what I was picturing when you were talking about that. Yeah,
they tried to fucking poison him so he would lose his beard, so he wouldn't have so much pull. He wouldn't have any authority like he's fucking Samson or something, right?
Yeah. Trim them locks.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of scary, playing with the hypnosis stuff. If you can get into your psychology and you can tweak your perception on things, you're completely, oh man, I better buy that car if I want to be a good mom or a good father. I have to believe this thing if I want to fit into society. But then also, who do we believe? Who do we believe? Like, what narrative do we believe? Do we believe that the news is news? Do we believe Facebook is the news? Do we believe memes are the news? Is Fox News the news or CBC the news, And like living in Canada, for those that do, CBC is a very left-oriented media outlet. You will very rarely hear like conservative capitalist voices being voiced on CBC. But if you listen to American news, specifically Fox News, very seldom will you hear anything with a social narrative being put out on Fox News. So these are very much
well. And I think maybe the core difference in that is that like one is public and one is private. So whatever angle you have can buy into it. But I think the overall, like if you were to look at our country as a whole, left-leaning would probably be like, even if that's not how people vote necessarily, how we live.
We care about social
is
network
more
or social safety net,
right? And so that would make sense that a station that was representative of the country and was supposed to be public would be more of that.
You think? Well, of course, because they're relying on a social funding versus private funding. Who's going to privately fund? Which rich capitalist is going to privately fund a social safety net, kind of like narrative? I don't know anybody who's going to say, well, we should really tax the rich. A rich guy who's going to fund that voice? No, that's coming from the bottom up, not from the top down. Yeah.
Well, unless they can find a way for it to make it profitable for themselves.
Right.
Unless they can find a way to scam the system, then they're all for it.
If it's a tax write-off.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. I donate. So
I donate.
I donate. I'm a philanthropist.
Full-on rapist?
Full-on rapist. So in 1953, talking about narratives, Project Mockingbird happened in the States, and it was a secret campaign financed by the CIA to influence media. And there was only ever 6 pages ever released and declassified about Project or Operation Mockingbird. And so this is where Edward Bernays pops up again, because the CIA took inspiration and consultation from Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud's nephew, regarding his theory swaying mass psychology and public opinion. And the CIA began sponsoring and subsidizing paid media outlets and journalists to produce news releases, quote-unquote news releases, that conformed with the direction that they wanted the public opinion to be swayed in the USA, that went along with the CIA's goals, right? Now, the CIA recruited leading journalists to present the CIA narrative as news, as opposed to editorial, as legitimate news sources. They funded student cultural organizations. So if you go to university, those, pro-USA groups are funded by these guys, and they bankrolled full-on magazines as fronts for their journalism, right?
Well, and I'd heard, too, that with that one, they'd also, there wasn't a news agency in North America that didn't have an operative in it.
That makes sense.
It was everywhere somebody had a connection, and it wasn't just to spread disinformation or control the narrative, it was to catch his information as it was coming in, too.
Yeah, catch it,
so if there was some
censor it.
small-town fucking guy, I got the hot scoop. Okay, cool, now we got it.
Yeah. Or if anybody's coming in with a narrative that says anything about social welfare and, what about capitalism and what about this corrupt, this agency over here that's like giving their guys subpar wages, that story is erased and like pro agency comes out, right?
That's the catch and kill that the National Enquirer was doing for years.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was almost why the National Enquirer existed, was to go and catch these different
I like
different
that term,
stories.
catch and kill.
That's Ronan Farrow's book, Catch and
Okay.
Kill. It's all about that, and about like David Pecker ran the National Enquirer, and his safe of compromat on all these different influential people, where their stories would come out of affairs or whatever, and they would go out and buy the story and then kill it. And they said that that's part of the reason why that McDougal was suing Trump, was because she had a story that she wanted to tell about their affair, and the National Enquirer bought it from her and then squashed it, never ran it. And then they said that afterwards they got sued about it because they said she was supposed to run they were supposed to run an article for her, and that was contractually obligated. And they said, okay, well, we'll run an article. So they took some old picture of her from a fitness shoot or whatever, and then did like a workout article for her. They're like, yeah, there's her article. Yeah,
Really?
it's because it's all this shady shit, right? Because they're
Bought and paid for.
Exactly, and they're trying to control that narrative. And I mean, most people don't look at the National Enquirer as news, but if they have enough stories in there every once in a while about actual shit that's going on with celebrities or whatever, people can still believe enough of it, and they can still act like they're reputable enough to go and interview somebody about it, and then say, okay, no, we have all the rights to that story. You can't tell nobody. You gotta
And they
sign
have the
an NDA.
finances to buy.
And exactly, and not necessarily because the National Enquirer is an incredibly profitable outfit, but because a lot of these guys are giving them money to make sure they're doing this exact thing for them.
Well, and if you've got enough money, like let's say, it doesn't matter who I am. If somebody says, I'm going to give you $200,000 for that article you wrote, or for that information, or that photograph you have, and now I own all the legal rights to it,
Yeah.
and a legitimate news source says, oh, I'll give you $10,000, who are you going to take? And then when they have that, they can wave it around.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, they could even go to the person who the photograph is about and say, hey, what are you going to give us in order so we don't release this? So that's that bargaining chip. It's a bargaining chips 101, right? So yeah, with Operation Mockingbird, eventually the CIA expanded what they were doing to influence foreign media as well, and to finance and to propagandize political campaigns with a bias disguised as legitimate news releases. All right. So then, oh God, here we go. As a subset of Operation Mockingbird, a lot of guys have heard about banana republics. It's funny because on the internet, you look up Banana Republic, guess what comes up? A women's clothing fucking store. That's what you're going to find when you look up Banana Republic now. But Operation PB Success was a branch of Mockingbird involving the United Fruit Company and their presence mostly in Guatemala. Which episode did we have Jose on? Like 3? Or
Yeah, I think it was 3.
if you look back in our episodes, we talk about this with Jose and when he was a guest on the page. So Edward Bernays applied Freudian psychoanalytic theory towards crowd psychology and advertising. And instead of advertising the practical uses, like I mentioned before, of a product, he would appeal to the root psychological motivations: fear, security, safety, sexuality, love, belonging, social status. If you want to YouTube anything on Edward Bernays, you can look up Meet Edward Bernays, Master of Propaganda on YouTube. There's a good video up there. And one of his quotes said, "If we can understand the mechanisms and motives of a group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it?" It's Propaganda 101, right? So in 1944 to 1955, Guatemala was under a revolution. Because up until that point, U.S. corporate interests had been financially supporting despots and dictators that would give them dirt cheap land in order to have a monopoly on soil and farming. And so specifically one group, United Fruit Company, was one of the biggest ones. Funny, UFC, right? So United Fruit was one of the biggest ones that would exploit the land, exploit the workers, and have dictators protecting their interests, right? So from 44 to 51, there was this revolution and there was this fight, and they had finally had a democratically elected social, he was a democratic socialist named Arbenz, or I think it's Jacobo Arbenz. He was put into power, democratically elected in. He legitimately had power there. and he instigated land reforms to redistribute the U.S. corporate-held lands to the Guatemalan farmers, right? Which is a pretty noble thing to do for your own fucking people.
And in your own country, hey, can you imagine if just like 70% of Saskatchewan all belonged to Chinese companies? Mm-hmm. You know, and had for years, and all of a sudden we got a government that was like, no, fucking, they can't own all of our shit. Yeah.
Or you know, if an indigenous person said, guess what? You know, I get in power, and I'm giving the crown land.
That should have been the first thing I said, actually.
Yeah, whatever, you know.
Let's have them more accurate and
indigenous
realistic.
people get in and say, we're giving all the crown land back to the indigenous people, which I think is a valid thing. So whatever, the UFC had bought and exploited huge swaths of developing South American countries. Actually, not just Guatemala, all over South America. Jose talked about that in our thing. To establish these product monopolies. And they were financing and installing puppet dictators, right? The Secretary of State at the time was a guy named John Dulles, and the director of the CIA was a guy named Alan Dulles. Secretary of State and the director of the CIA were brothers. Mm-hmm. And John Dulles was, he owned a stake in shares. He had a law company because he was a lawyer. He was part owner of a law company, and that law company owned shares in the United Fruit Company. So the Secretary of State was directly profiting off of this exploitive regime, the corporate regime in South America. So these guys got together and they decided to contact their public relations manager, a guy by the name of Edward Bernays, for the United Fruit Company, to come up with a strategy.
Their public relations manager.
Yes, and come up with a strategy. Who wrote the book on propaganda. So in 1953, old John calls his brother Alan, who's the head of the CIA, legitimately the director of the CIA, and the CIA authorizes Operation PB Success to instill a terror campaign against Guatemala. So they had unmarked planes bombing cities and farms in Guatemala, trying to terrorize the people and the army. And they spread propaganda down there so much that the military was...
Sorry, though, hold on. Unmarked planes?
Yeah.
Like, who else is doing it then? You know what I mean? Like,
these are black ops.
We've got unmarked gunships going in. And you're like, wait a minute, who's got gunships?
Yeah, so, right, yeah. So these are black ops by the definition of the word, right? Like, who are those guys? It's black, who knows? So the army was freaked out because they spread a rumor that the U.S. is going to invade, and Arbenz resigned. He's like, okay, I'm backing away. Well, after that, a propaganda regime was put in place with a fake news agency called the American Information Bureau was set up. And all of a sudden, the UFC doesn't talk about their involvement in South America anymore. And it's all about this new public relations media outlet called the American Information Bureau. And so what happened is Bernays was part of the head of this, what is it called, the AIB. So he brought a bunch of American journalists for legitimate news sources, you know, like big newspapers, big, publications, to Guatemala. And then all of a sudden there was a huge riot, anti-American riot down there. Somehow, out of the blue, this riot happens when all these journalists are being wined and dined by this American Information Bureau. And when they get sent back to the USA, these guys were falsely the Democratic Socialist, Arbenz, the what was it called? The democratically elected president of Guatemala was falsely reported to be a dangerous communist backed by Moscow. And journalists were reporting that the communist Guatemalan regime and that the Russians were moving in and they were going to put military presence in Guatemala, which was 200 miles out of the USA. So because of that, there was a huge coup, and there was a huge amount of public support for the U.S. to support dictators and coups to go in and oust the communists down in Guatemala. And 140,000 people were killed to install a banana dictatorship, a banana republic down there. And that's where the term banana republic comes from, because the whole thing was established so Americans could get fucking bananas.
Yep. Well, pick a resource, right? You want to monopolize it.
Yeah. Diamonds, oil, whatever the fuck it is. They're going to kill you so they can get... Imagine, who would kill somebody for oil? How is this any different? What's happening in the Middle East right now? No blood for oil? This is what we're fucking talking about. But people just don't know about this stuff. And it blows my goddamn mind. Anyways, so that's Operation Mockingbird, or at least the touching on the Operation Mockingbird. And that's some pretty fucked up shit, because it's intentionally misrepresenting the truth to the public to sway public opinion so they can do capitalist evil shit. And when Jose's family moved to North America, they're like, you guys don't know what they do down there? No, we're inside the gates. We're inside the gates of this house, so we don't know what's happening outside the house. Next step would be 1956 to 1979. People started learning about this, and there was a war in Vietnam and all of this other stuff. And those black people, they were starting to stand up, and they're like, hey, why are you killing us? We've got some rights, right? And the civil rights movement started picking up, and even the white kids in the colleges were saying, what the fuck's going on here? Like, we think about it, 56, 60s kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. government, the FBI specifically, decided to come up with COINTELPRO, which stands for Counterintelligence Program. And the COINTELPRO was a series of covert and illegal projects conducted domestically by the FBI aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting American political organizations. So anything that interrupted or challenged the dominant political narrative in the USA was basically coverted, surveilled, infiltrated, discredited. And this included communist civil rights groups, anti-war groups, the Black Panthers, Martin Luther King, an American Indian movement. They did also do some COINTELPRO against the KKK, but to a much lesser degree than the left, right? So I'm not going to pretend that they only did the left, but at the same time, in San Diego in 1971, the FBI did finance, arm, and orchestrate a far-right group called the Secret Army Organization, the SAO, which were comprised largely of anti-communist paramilitary group, the Minutemen, where they targeted, intimidated, and outright attacked anti-war activists, right? So this is a street level, what they would define as terrorist group by today's standards, politically motivated, attacking, and armed individuals, financed by the FBI to attack their own people, right?
And that's the only time they did it.
Yeah, they've never done it before or since. That was
not
it.
last week.
Yeah, Proud
You
Boys.
haven't seen it all summer.
Yeah. Smear campaigns, intentional agitators, false media reports, planting drugs and weapons, wrongful imprisonment, violence, death threats, and outright assassinations happened with the COINTEL program. And it sounds scary. Like, we talk about this stuff happening in Russia. We talk about this stuff happening in South America, in Brazil, or these countries where the government is so oppressive. But in North America, we have freedom. We have freedom. Well, America. I'm lucky we're in Canada, so maybe I won't end up with a black helicopter or surveillance. I don't give a fuck, but whatever. So they would do this stuff. And when, like, they killed several Black Panthers, like Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, I think
Chadwick Boseman.
Chadwick Boseman, yeah.
No, this guy who played the Black Panther, he just died.
Oh, yeah, right. He did the cancer needle.
He did get cancer, actually.
Right?
Isn't that fucked up?
Yeah, right. So when these guys would go to court, the COINTEL program, they would lie on stand, perjury. They would intimidate witnesses, and they would threaten witnesses, and they would withhold evidence of what they were actually fucking doing. There's tons of stuff on the COINTEL program. J. Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the FBI at the time, he ordered agents to, quote, expose, disrupt, misdirect, and otherwise neutralize activities of movements, and especially their leaders that are enemies of the U.S. government or the direction of the political narrative at the time, right? They wiretapped Martin Luther King. They bugged his hotel rooms. And when they found out he was up to some sexy shenanigans, they sent him, I guess, a package that said, we know what you're doing. We're going to out you if you don't kill yourself. To try and blackmail him into just killing himself to stop, like, the Black Power movement. They had I don't have this one written down. They had a program. It's on my Facebook, but they had a program called Operation Black Hate. You can find this one on the COINTEL Wikipedia page, where they were dedicated to undermining any black nationalist organization, and they wanted to stop what they considered a messiah figure from rising and uniting the different black sections of, like, activists at the time. And there's, I think, I don't have the proof on this, but you can look it up because it is there. I think they outed the fact that the government was involved with the Martin Luther King assassination to some degree. Yeah, so it's funny that all these people with this, like, Black Lives Matter, Martin Luther King said this. Like, you don't fucking know, man. Like, they tried to undermine everything he did the entire way that he was doing it. There was never, let's all work together. It was like, no, we got to fucking shut this guy down, right? Let's see. So The 1956 original mission statement of COINTELPRO was to increase factionalization, cause disruption, win defectors inside the Communist Party in the USA. So, or what was it? That was it. The Communist Party of the USA was an organization that wanted to, social justice and, workers' rights and all of that stuff. And they had phone harassment, IRS audits, falsifying internal documents. Eventually, all of the COINTELPRO information got put out during a Muhammad Ali fight because Muhammad Ali was being investigated by COINTELPRO for being a member of the Nation of Islam. That's when he changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. And so a lot of the agents were off watching this fight. So an organization called the Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI broke in to the FBI headquarters. They stole dossiers and whistle blew to the media. They gave all the dossiers to the media. And that's how people found out what the government was actually up to with COINTELPRO. Yeah.
And that's what reporting and journalism and shit is supposed to be. That's what always... Everything that this happened, especially in American fucking history with political shit like that, has come to light because of reporters. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people now are very disillusioned with the media, and they think that it's being purposely manipulated from every angle just to tell a certain narrative. And it's like, yeah, there is a bit of that, but like sometimes it is just people getting the fucking truth out there, and that's how you find out about shit like this.
Well, here in Canada, I never learned about the residential schools, the 60s scoop. I never learned about...
We didn't in school. I never did. No.
My daughter's generation is, and now, because they can't hide it anymore, because people have a voice.
What was still happening when we were in school?
I hate to...
They closed the last one in 94 or whatever the fuck it was.
Yeah, right, yeah. So I hate to say it, but one way or another, what we're doing right now is the new media. You know what I mean? We are journalists. In the same way that people like to think that sharing memes is media, but that you need your sources. You need to have your shit in your ducks in a row in a lot of ways. But when people have a voice and they're communicating and they're saying, okay, here's some truth that you may not have been heard of before, go educate yourself because it's out there to be learned, but you've never been taught it, that's the new media. And I think it's a very important thing. It's underground. It's a zine,
Sure.
And when we talked about that in the last podcast, CBC depends on their funding. So if they don't have to please advertisers, then they don't have to please anybody. They could say whatever they want. You know what I mean? As long as it's within the parameters of what's legal to put out there, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have to please anybody. I could say whatever I want, truth or not,
Mm-hmm.
But ideally, all this stuff is sourceable. That's why I'm saying names and dates, and you can go look it up. And but let's say we're on a mainstream radio, right, or a mainstream provider, or our advertisers are saying, here you go. Well, suddenly Joe Blow, who runs that business, doesn't like that political narrative, and he's going to take your money away. So you're a slave to those people that are paying you, right? So yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder how much CBC is allowed to criticize Canadian government. Well, they do talk about reparations a fair amount. Yeah, it's a tough one. Anyways.
Yeah. Fuck. What else? Oh, this is kind of just a funny little conspiracy. Little funny conspiracy. So I've been listening to this Tim Dillon for the last while. I've mentioned it a few times now. He's got a podcast, Tim Dillon Show. It's fucking hilarious. But anyways, he's been having, because he's from Long Island originally, and he's been having kind of a fabricated beef with the Kumo brothers. There's Chris and what the fuck's his brother's name there? That's the governor of New York.
Oh, yeah.
So the governor, and then Chris Kumo's on CNN.
I heard a lot of right people calling them Kumonists.
And yeah, fair enough. Well, he's been having kind of like a fake online feud with them, and it's really fucking funny.
Like it's a joke.
It's kind of a joke, but he says it like it's definitely serious, and keeps referring to them as like a gangster mob family. They're running New York, they're running the media, and he calls them Chris Fredo Kumo Corleone, and he was the one who had fucking coronavirus. And so he frequently mentions that he also never had coronavirus. Never forget. So Chris Kumo never had coronavirus. But anyways, so he's been having beef with these guys for a little bit, and it's funny while he's doing it on his show. Well, he's been out in L.A. for this whole fucking time, and he just recently goes back to New York to go and do his show. And they're having weird rules for shows, so they were going to do it outside in a fucking tent and
like social distancing stuff.
Yes, and it's this comedy club that had been doing it for a bit now, so they were kind of getting it sorted out. Well, the weekend that he comes up to come and do his show, all of a sudden the governor, Kumo, fucking passes some sort of executive order and shuts it all down. And I'm not saying it was specifically that show, but he definitely couldn't fucking do it. So he's been pushing that it's some sort of conspiracy on behalf of them. The Meatball Brothers have come to get him.
So what's the beef based off of? Like, what's the...
Well, I mean, he's just talking shit about them, right?
Oh, okay,
and if you're
like
a comedian out there
politics?
talking shit, and like, yeah, and he mentions the one gentleman's wife frequently. And
really?
Yeah, it's pretty fucking funny, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it could be these guys are going, you know what, I don't like what you're saying, and shutting them down even for some comedy.
You're lucky nobody shows up to your house, brother. You know, that kind of...
Yeah, right?
If they are gangsters, right?
Yeah.
You know, you never know.
Hey, fuck, it's New York City, man. I
Yeah,
assumed everybody
yeah.
was a gangster.
Well, to get into power, you need to, you know...
Yeah, people are like, fucking the mayor of New York, he's America's mayor. I was like, he's probably the most likely to be a gangster out of all mayors, right? When Rudy Giuliani ends up being a fucking nut job, it's like, it's not surprising. That's what I expected, right?
You have to know how to navigate some circles, you know,
some
unions.
gangsterisms,
Yeah, my pencil's all fucked up.
You're really fucking with that thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it to work. It's not fucking working. Anyways, but yeah. So that's interesting. Well, that goes back to like artists being shut down by people that disagree with what they have to say. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if it's a left-wing artist where a bunch of conservatives are like, these people are gay and these people are, you know, whatever, they can't have a voice, or God forbid, you know, Antifa saying this black metal band uses, you know, fascist imagery that we don't approve of, so your venue can't put these people on, you know? Just fuck off. Really. Just fuck off.
The simple solution to that is just fuck off.
Yep, that's my theory.
Mind your own goddamn business and just fuck off.
So yeah, a little bit more on that conspiracy. This one you probably dig, actually, because this is a very interesting.
Dig them all. You give me a little tiny shovel.
Oh god, yeah. Okay, so Edward Bernays, propaganda guy. His uncle is Sigmund Freud, psychoanalytical guy. One of his contemporaries is Carl Jung, other like foundational, pivotal person in early psychoanalysis. Now, Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, studied mysticism. And this is the roots of traditional religion, whether we're talking about like the Hindus and meditation with the chakra system, or specifically Freud being Jewish, he studied Jewish mysticism being the Kabbalah, right? And the Kabbalah is the foundation principle of a lot of psychology. Like you can say like these are universal principles, but they also apply to the human personality. They kind of like they believe that it's outlining the personality of God. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like the template of creation. So as these guys study this, my theory, for what it's worth, is a lot of their ideas on psychology and pivotal foundational motivations in the human personality comes from these ancient religious beliefs, whether it's like the motivations of the chakra system or the motivations in the Kabbalah. And then they incorporate it's like, well, how does that affect my personality, right? So Operation Stargate was another U.S. operation that was a research into psychic phenomena. And it was funded from, I guess, 72 to 95. And they claimed that the project failed in 1988. But it was funded till 95. And it's also known as Scanate, S-C-A-A-N-A-T-E, or Gondola, Wish, Grill Flame, Sunstreak, or they had $20 million in funding.
Two of those were my nickname in high school.
Yeah, those ones, yeah, good deal.
Old Gondola.
So they went pop. Interestingly enough, in the middle of talking about these psychic soldiers, Dusty's chair magically destroyed, and we had to pause. We will not be stopped, you psychic fucks. Yeah. Anyways, so Operation Stargate was originally a remote viewing research, and they wanted to study extrasensory perception. And it operated till 97, and they had this guy, Frederick Skip Atwater, who was known as the psychic headhunter. He was part of the U.S. military, and there's legitimately a book and a movie about this. The movie's a comedy because it's so fucking outlandish, and it's called The Men Who Stare at Goats. Are you familiar with this? You guys seen this?
I have seen it.
So, yeah, the story is about what happened when a small group of men, highly placed within the United States military, government, and intelligence services, began believing in very strange things. So these guys went and they studied, like the Nazis, Tibetan meditation, the chakra systems, Kabbalah, energy work, And some of them claimed they could assassinate goats by staring at them. That's where the name Men Who Stare at Goats come from. They were working on this like reality meshing with the spiritual stuff. And they went to this guy, Bill Monroe, who ran the Monroe Institute of Energy Work. It's still in operation. If you look up the Monroe Institute, about remote viewing, basically magic, understanding the essence of the holographic universe and manipulating the holographic universe by willpower, right? And the Frederick Skip Atwater, the guy they talk about in this book, The Men Who Stare at Goats, who was in the military at the time, later went on to become president of the Monroe Institute when he retired from the U.S. military. And this had to do with developing psychic soldiers, which were interested in primarily psi warfare, remote viewing, precognition, psychic attack, and defense. Unfortunately, this is the quote from the declassified documents, despite having some dramatic hits, they found that the lack of concreteness and reliability in the Operation Stargate didn't have reason to fund it anymore. So those dramatic hits means that some of these guys legitimately, by remote viewing, found their targets. That some of these guys legitimately were able to kill goats with their minds.
And for people who don't know, like, remote viewing is picturing something that you have no context for. You don't know, like, you're given coordinates on a map, for example,
and what's there,
and exactly what's there, and then you can either draw or describe it without actually seeing it.
Or they give you a picture of an individual and where do you think he is.
Yes.
And they're able through a process.
It's like a gnarly fucking, like, Where's Waldo or Carmen Sandiego, right?
Yes, but it's in their mind and they can describe it, and they're coming up with some dramatic hits.
Yeah.
The fact that they're
and they're doing it so they can send a cluster strike of bunker busters in there too.
Yeah, so they're militarizing
right?
this psychic ability.
It's not
right?
just like we're missing a Timmy. What well is he down? It's like, no, we're looking for Al Qaeda. What cave do I bomb?
Well, and that's just it. And so what they're saying is, like, there was a lack of concreteness and reliability in this psychic phenomenon, but at the same time, there were dramatic hits, which is scary as fuck.
Yeah.
So this guy, Robert A. Monroe, he founded the Monroe Institute, and before he ran into the military, he was just very interested in meditation and energy work and shit like that. And he worked with the CIA in order to develop their program that this Men Who Stare at Goats is about. And it's funny because it's written in a very comedic kind of tone, like, haha, but they really were practicing this shit. So basically they were doing black magic. You know, by any definition of the term, in any of the spiritual systems, the U.S. was specifically employing black magic as part of their stuff.
Yeah, if you're using incantations and fucking Christ, I can't talk.
Meditation for assassination purposes.
To do the darkest of purposes.
That's
right?
cursing.
To kill something.
That's fucking cursing. And there's MonroeInstitute.org. You can look up, like, the website for the institute. You can go to their brick and mortar address and study with these people. But there's a declassified document called Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process from 1983, where they talk about biofeedback, meditation, trance-induced states, hypnosis, influence on belief systems, fear of dismantling mainstream religions. It's legitimately a government-sanctioned manual on ritual magic. It's the most fucked up thing I've ever seen. So take a look. If you want to, you can go down the rabbit hole. You can download the entire file in a PDF form to your fucking phone to read on iPhone or on iBooks. It's called the CIA Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process from 1983. These guys are talking about transcendental states, interdimensional, like shearing. It's nuts. It's insane. But it's a legitimate $20 million financing this program in order to create.
And that's what's reported.
Black magic. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, the 20 million is what's reported, and, like, there's supposedly lots of these different fucking underground groups for the government where you see little bits of it like this and you think that's the whole thing. And 20 million was what it was funded. It was like, well, no, it was several billion actually, and we really fucking hid that stuff. But this was the stuff that you're able to swallow and be okay with when you find out about it.
This is the stuff we felt safe enough to declassify.
Exactly.
Yep. And that blows my fucking mind. So all of this stuff, and these are just like my quick reference list. This is not the rabbit hole. The rabbit hole goes very, very much deeper than this. So it's weird when we talked about that the Montauk conspiracy and the Nazis. How crazy are they to think that they can look up Tibet and incorporate this superstition into their political stuff? there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we're really not talking about, or that people aren't even aware of. And those people that start getting into it, it is a slippery slope to go down that fucking rabbit hole, and how far until all of a sudden you're off in left field. And oh my God, someone's going to hear this and they're going to be like, black magic and the CIA? Oh, the fuck, you're like Charlie, Bell with all the little lines lining up the conspiracy, like wide-eyed at 3 in the morning.
Karen, can we talk about the mail? Yeah.
But yeah, so this stuff, it's on the table. If you ever want to look it up, go check it out.
Carol, not Karen.
And this is a reason why I don't fucking trust almost any of the narrative that's happening on Facebook right now. Who has access to?
Well, and it's you should be untrusting, because they just recently had another 2 like Twitter pages or Facebook groups or whatever that were supposedly black Democrats that had switched from the party, that were becoming Republicans, and they were putting a lot of this different right wing kind of stuff out. And of course, they're stock photos of one guy, and the other one's a model from fucking France, and they have no idea what's going on. And some of these troll accounts are using it to push their fucking narrative. So like it's and again, these are just the ones they're finding out about.
It's
and how do you
fucking
catch it?
dumpster
Because
fire.
it's a nonstop thing, and with that kind of shit, especially if you're a foreign government with a dedicated network of nerds to fucking work on this stuff, somebody shuts one down, you start 10 more up. Like that's what they do.
Well, and with me lately, and it's tough. It's going to be tough. We talked about it last week, about how much of my worldview is influenced by the media that I choose to inundate myself with. Really, my subconscious is programmed by the stuff that I allow to come into my consciousness, right? So as I choose what I allow in my consciousness, I literally choose my worldview. Right? If I'm going to the church all the time, that's going to be my worldview. If I'm watching horror movies all the time, that's going to be my worldview. If I'm watching, if I'm engaging online with all of this like pedo conspiracy, left wing, right wing, Black Lives Matter, you're a racist, you're not a racist. When I leave my house without my phone, none of that stuff is there. None of that stuff is there.
But it taints your interactions, hey? Like if you're letting it fucking already get you worked up and have your worldview tainted, and then you go out and actually have interactions with people, and sometimes it fucks with it. Legitimately,
we were walking our dogs, and there was a young black guy coming up, and I'm like, do I smile at him? Do I look at him? Do I smile too long? Do I smile too little? How do I engage with this? When without all of this stuff being inundated on my social media, it would have been, hey, there's a guy coming my way. How's it going? You having a good day? All right. Yeah. See you around. I'm walking my dogs, just like a normal fucking human.
Made everybody kind of hyper aware of, but without hyper aware without being thoughtful, if that makes sense. Hey, like you're like, I'm aware of this, I'm aware of that. It's like, okay, we'll take it in, and what is the thoughtful thing to do in that? I don't know. I'm concerned about the whole thing. I'm worried. I'm scared.
So I'm going to, and this is going to be a tough one for me, because I've been doing a lot of work with my addictions and stuff like that. Well, I've been doing that for years. I'm sober now and I'm clean. But I realize that I'm pretty much addicted to the drama of social media. So I'm forcing myself to limit my phone time.
Yeah.
My goal is 1 hour a day. I'm going to check my messages, quick scan, quick engagement, see you later.
Yeah.
And if that fails, I guess I failed, and it proves that it's a fucking addiction. And I'm like, no, I just like it. I can quit anytime I want.
I like it the regular amount.
Yeah, I like it. I can quit at any time. I just don't want to quit. And that's addictive talk 101, right? So I'm going to continue to post, my tattoo stuff. This program that me and buddies are working on for like a secular, non-spiritual based recovery program for addictions, instead of 12-step programming where you give up all your shortcomings to God. This is about reclaiming our power. So me and my buddy are going to be working on that, or a few buddies, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get offline as much as possible and start working on tangible shit. This podcast being one, my art being another, this program being another, and spending time in real life as opposed to virtual life. And I think I want to see how it's going to change my worldview, hanging out with my partner and my friends and do real life stuff.
It'll be richer, and there'll be more of it. Because again, that shit is so distractionary too. Like you get into it, and you're like, even that time you spend doing it, like what are you physically doing, right? You're sitting still, looking at this fucking
sedentary
thing.
Yeah. Well, Elon Musk just this last week, I think, unveiled his Neuralink in pigs, and they can trace the neural activity in the pig's snout, and they can register exactly what's going on, and they're going to be able to decipher the neural activities in that one, at least the pig's snout to start. And who knows? Maybe we're living in a computer simulation. But this is a simulation I'm going to step into for a while. The one off of my phone. And then the one I'm in, I'm going to go live life.
This is the most advanced one.
Yeah.
This is the most engaging. And
this holographic universe is the one I'm going to engage.
It has more repercussions than any of the other ones, but it also has a lot more rewards. Well, I mean, physically, right?
Yeah.
You lose bits and pieces, and it makes it harder for you to navigate this world.
Well, and that's another element. Like, how much of what we discuss is about a country that I don't even live in?
Well, it's, you know what, and it's true, but it's, again, it is something that is tied to us. I mean, like, what happens there does reflect on here. We either have to adjust for it and accommodate, or we end up imitating it. You know,
well,
like it's
if we choose to engage with their media. And this is, I think, I had a debate with this guy from Arizona, and he's like, why do you give a shit about the U.S. so much? You're always on Trump and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, because we're inundated with your media.
Yeah.
Whether it's music or culture or...
Well, plus, it's also the most outrageous thing in the world that's happening right now.
It's pretty fucking nuts.
You know what I mean? Like, if it was just hurricanes happening, you know, we'd probably be talking about that. But it's fucking insanity. It's not... Because, again... it wasn't like this when Obama or Bush or Clinton, you know, like we were interested and engaged, but it wasn't like this.
It's just business as usual.
Exactly. This is a different level though. This is a different beast. It's something you got to fucking pay attention to, because when this is all done, like, again, they're going to be talking about what happened in these last 4 years for hundreds of fucking years.
Well, it's very possible if there's an America in 100 years.
Well, that'll be why they'll be talking about it in some other fucking... This is what used to exist. This is the Atlantis myth of America, you know, what it was.
A culture in decline.
Well, because we were talking about it, I think, last week when I said, like, maybe LA is on its way out. Like, maybe it's going to go the way of fucking Detroit or any place else that was, you know, once this bustling beacon in the fucking dark, that now it's like, I want to drive by.
That is a wasteland.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be the new Detroit. You never know where things are going.
Although the one benefit to it is it does have the most gorgeous climate maybe in the fucking world for most of the year, so people will keep coming back to that. But if there's not all the other reasons that people exist in a spot going on there, well, fuck, why are you there?
Well, you know what's interesting? I've got a guy, an acquaintance. I won't go so far as to say he's a friend, but we bounce ideas off each other and we argue with each other. And he's an ex-Hammerskin from Detroit. Okay. And this guy, every time I have an opinion on like unity, on inequality, he's like, dude, I could tell you've never been to Detroit. And I'm like, that may be a valid opinion. If you're living in an urban environment where shit's hitting the fucking wreck and people are dividing on lines and, like, you know, kind of like jailhouse rules in a fucking full city.
But that's
right?
like any place where there's civil unrest, where there's a fucking civil war going on, where there's ethnic cleansing going on. If you use those as the examples of how people interact, well, you've never been to the fucking Congo. Yeah, okay, but that's clearly a fucking problem, and that's not indicative of all of the people. That's just what's happening fucking there.
I had a buddy tell me you've never been to L'Orange.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's what I'm saying.
And that's
right?
northern Saskatchewan for those people that aren't local.
Yes, right. There's places that are gnarly all over the world that exist, and it doesn't matter your fucking shade.
You know, it's a tough one, because, like, as much as we want, I want unity. Okay, this is another one. Oh, fuck. This might be a rabbit hole in the end. And we got a little bit of time. The other day, I fucking go to Burger King. I'm like, I'm going to get a veggie burger at Burger King. I don't normally eat there, but fuck it. Like I said, long day. I was doing the oil change, help buddy build a deck. I wanted to get some food.
We're all just poor greasy cogs.
Yeah,
Got to keep that lubrication coming.
So I go into Burger King, and there's a couple catty girls and a couple redneck dudes, and there's this person that's borderline morbidly obese, and and a person that can't really speak English that much, doing their best to navigate this environment. And I realized
of hillbillies, fatties, and idiots.
Yes, it's basically the worst.
Uh-huh.
And people talking, gossiping, and these rednecks started fucking scoffing and kind of laughing when I tried to explain that I just want a veggie burger to the person that can't really speak English, you know, and I realized that my lofty ideas on wanting to save the world aren't necessarily legitimate. Because I really don't want to save some of these people, because they don't want to be saved themselves. Yeah. They don't want to change their worldview. They want to be catty. They want to be redneck. They want to be racist. They want to pound their fast food. That's where they want to be. Yeah. They don't want to change a fucking thing in their life. And you know what? No matter how much, maybe if you give me 20 years of having conversations with these individuals, they might have a different worldview. But where they're at is exactly where they want to be.
Yeah. Well, but again, that's only based on their perspective, right? Because as soon as any of those people have that perspective, nobody thinks that's what they are. You know what I mean? Even really, really fat people don't think they're that really, really fat. Even the biggest asshole, doesn't think he's a big asshole or a bully, right? They still think they're like we talked about this in the last one. Sometimes you're still the hero even if you're the fucking bad guy. So from what they're working with in their perspective, they don't see a problem with it, right?
So there's no need to change.
Well, no. What they need to do is they need to continue to have experiences that then give them that perspective where they can see themselves through someone else's eyes and go, holy fuck, that's what I sound like? That's what I look like when I do that? I never realized that. And then when they have that, then it's their opportunity to go, you know what, I'm dissatisfied with this and I want to do the things I can, even if it takes me a week, a month, a fucking lifetime, whatever it is I have to do. Or I understand that and it's not bad enough for me yet to change my ways, so I'm going to stay comfortable with that and keep doing it. Because eventually, almost everybody has a breaking point of that kind of shit, where eventually you do enough, and sometimes it takes a lifetime to see it, where you go, fuck, I've done that way too long, I have to fucking change. And I think that's not... It would be nice to be able to educate people like that by telling them your experience and showing them your perspective so they can understand it, but if they're not open to it and they're not already at that level where they have to, a lot of times it just fucking, like you said, falls on deaf ears.
Yes.
No one wants to hear that, right? But it has to happen to them for them to have that. They have to, that guy who's morbidly obese has to fucking end up in the hospital for the 15th time or whatever it is for those
coronary heart issues.
Until finally he goes, no, this is the fucking time I have to do it. And some people die and keep having those over and over again and it never gets there. But some people do, and that's their journey. And I mean, it would be nice to make it easier for them. There. It'd be nice to help them, but at the same time...
So, should I give a fuck?
Yeah, man, you should. And when you can, right?
Well,
when you can.
And that was my big thing.
If you give a fuck all the time, that's a good thing. It won't always be appreciated, but it's like having kids. Like, how many times do you do things that you're like, my kid's really going to fucking appreciate this? This is something I put a lot of work into, and they don't even get the fucking surface of how deep this fucking thing was for you to get there, because they don't. And because we also withhold that from people, too, because there's a little value in that going like, well, I know I did all this work, right?
But is there value? Or is that
to me,
selfishness? That's
absolutely.
A selfish,
absolutely.
There's
a selfish value in us doing that because we went out of our way to get this thing and give it to somebody to do it. And when they show the appreciation to the level we want, well, then we're validated. And when they don't, we go, what? They don't find value in this work I did? When that's not the case. They don't understand it. They don't know. They didn't see the hours you put in at work or the extra tattoos you picked up on days off when you wanted to make sure they could do that thing. They don't know any of that,
well,
right?
That's my child.
That's what I'm saying.
Society
but that's the same thing, my friend.
You think?
It's all these people who haven't lived the life yet that they need to have these experiences. That's why your child acts like that, because they haven't gone out and worked hard extra to pay for somebody else's thing and hoping they would appreciate it. They don't have a concept of it yet, right? And if a person is really good at articulating that and bringing them on the journey, they can maybe understand it. It still doesn't mean they'll ever really appreciate it until they've done that extra shift of work to get somebody else something, right? And I think they're just, it's your children, right? Even the picture you're painting in that Burger King, like I could picture a lot of those people, and they don't have a lot of worldly experiences outside of their social and economic fucking group, right?
Well, yeah.
And until you have those, a lot of times you don't get to. One of your most violent perspective changes came in a foreign environment. You were in a different country, in a place where it might as well have been aliens for the language everybody's speaking, So I think that's the hero's journey, those hills you got to climb, all that kind of shit. For some people, it's getting fired from your job because of the racist shit you said, and finally it clicked in that, wait a minute, I can lose everything because of my idiotic beliefs that are totally fucking garbage. Or the final trip to the heart fucking specialist because you got to do this thing. Maybe that's their dragon to
waking
slay,
up
right?
after a drunk driving accident.
That's what I'm saying. Waking up and missing a finger and not knowing where it went. Maybe that's your fucking dragon, and it sucks. It's the worst fucking thing because I feel like I've had those kind of level of catastrophes happen to me a few times where I'm like, well, that's the bad as it's going to get. And then it gets worse the next time. And I'm like, why the fuck am I not learning these lessons I need to learn so I can stop this from happening?
So my walk away or my carry away from this is a very live and let die attitude.
Yeah.
Do your best, help them out.
Don't
take water from them.
I'm tired of doing my best. I'm going to do my little. And I'm going to help those that want to help them. Well, if that's your best
of the time.
Sure. And that's just it. Like, I'm right. What are the social justice types? Spoons. The amount of energy I have to put into this, I'm running out of that energy. Okay. Where I'm fighting that righteous fight, and it's just like you get shit on every turn. You know what I mean? And the righteous fight is neither right or left. It's trying to be that center line and saying, hey, have you balanced nuance? Have you balanced context? Yeah. And both sides just fucking shitting on you for it.
And when you're trying to get to a center line, though,
if there's a center line here, if you see somebody who's only this far off it, you probably don't need to feel a need to educate them. They get this far away. Oops, you're kind of thinking about it a little bit. They're all the fucking way over here, and you're over here, and you go, no, we got to get back to the middle. Well, that's a long way to go, so that becomes a big conversation. And we don't have those with the other ones that are a little off, where it's an easier conversation to kind of correct that and get them back to the middle. It's like it gets triggered when you see someone who's really extreme, but then that's an extreme amount of work. That's an extreme amount of experience they have to have, because that's the only way you can get there. You can't have a bunch of experiences with people of other backgrounds and on an honest human level and then still continue to be a racist. Eventually you have enough of them where you're like, oh, I guess what I was thinking was kind of wrong. It's not all of them.
It goes both ways, so that's where the context and nuance comes into play, where it's like, yeah, well, you hang out with people and you have common values and you have some commonality and you recognize the commonality between you. Like the Hindus would say namaste, the light in me recognizes the light in you as being the same light, and therefore we are common. But then there's the other element when you run into people that are whose value systems and their motivating conditions are so far removed from you. You're like, how are we even the same species?
Yeah.
You've got so much hate in you,
Well,
or
that's
you've got
it, too.
so much. You're so
those
fucking.
are broken toys, though.
Yeah.
Right? They're not operating on the same level as you are. They, even if you started out at the same level of broken and you've done the work to deal with that, well, then you're already that much further ahead. And it's almost like speaking two different fucking languages then, because if you haven't done that self work yourself, well, you can't get fucking help from anybody.
And what
else.
if you're absolutely uninterested in that self work,
Yeah.
and you're like,
Well-
fuck these guys, fuck them,
Yeah.
fuck you,
Well, though, and
fucking
again,
vegetarian or
then
whatever.
those are the kind of people that usually people don't have in their lives, and they live lonely lives of no love, no friendship, no family being around them when they continue to do that until they have that fucking epiphany and that breakthrough moment, and they go, holy fuck, this is what I've been doing to people. I've been pushing people away. I got to try and make that step. Or, again, they go to the end of their fucking journey doing that the whole time, and they end up alone.
Yep.
There's no one who treats people like that for their existence and then still has a big bright funeral where people are
Well,
celebrating
not a
their
bright
existence.
funeral, but they could have a whole bunch of miserable drunk people that are all like in the
A
same
lot
boat
of
with them.
grateful people that the journey is over.
Yeah,
sure, I'm
yeah.
glad to see that one fucking done.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
And, that's just it. All of us running into our escapes in one way or another, right? And, yeah, okay. Well, thanks for your input on that one.
That's it. Well, and I think keep doing
I'll probably
it,
have to
'cause-
listen to it back to really digest it, because I usually just wait for my chance to talk.
I'm trying to make it as quiet in my ears as possible while I think about what I'm going to say to you next. I don't want to hear any of this. Yeah. No, well, that's how I feel, because I get disillusioned with it too.
That's
Like, look at
basically
my
the word.
brothers throughout years
Disillusion. No, fuck.
trying to what I thought was help them. And again, I don't know all of their journey as much as I think I do. I still don't know what's going on in their head and all their relationships they've had and all that kind of shit. But I'm still trying to do what I think is right based on what I see. And it's never received the way I want it to be. It's always seen as being overbearing or pushy or whatever.
Well, and it because it's coming through the filter of their perception of you as opposed to your intention. Like my perception of myself is different than other people's perceptions of me, and that's a very valid point. One person would look at me and say, "Oh yeah, there's the short little funny guy." The next guy is like, "That guy looks like a fucking criminal." And the next person's like, "That person's a bully." And I'm like, "Well, where do I really fall?" Because like I know that those might be like one filter of me, but it's not a
well,
whole.
again, it's all characters, right?
Yeah,
And maybe that's just the character that you have to fucking interact with whoever that was, because not everybody sees you the same way. And some people they know you long enough, they're going to see all those versions of you and really build that character.
My partner B has a line that I really like, and well, this is paraphrasing it, but basically, if you were born as another person and you experienced all of the exact same life conditions as them, you would be making the exact same choices that they are making at any given time, because you would have no choice but to make those choices based off of your life experience.
Yeah.
Now, when I say I wouldn't do what that person is doing over there, largely that comes from my vantage point of my life experiences and my education.
Yeah,
and
where I am right now, I would not.
I
do
wouldn't
what that
make those
person's
choices,
doing. Yeah.
right? Whatever they are, and I'm judging those people based off of my life experience.
Yeah.
And now, if I lived their life experience, I wouldn't have any choice but to make those things. So that comes into play whether our destinies are preordained, where it's like my history of my life and my choices only allow me a very slim option. You know what I mean? And
Well, you know what, and I do see it as that, right? But then that's the beauty of freedom of choice too. Is like anytime that you become conscious of that, anytime in the moment you become aware that you are at the whim of the circumstance that you've already existed, you can just decide right then also to stop that then.
But your condition and life choice allowed you to get to that point
Yeah,
where
right?
you can do
That
that.
gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
So and it's funny. So I don't think I can change anybody, but I'd like to think that maybe even this podcast would give people an opportunity for new information that maybe allows them a new choice option that maybe they weren't exposed to before.
I just want to shift in perspective. You know what I mean? Just see it in a slightly different angle and light than you have previously, and then see if you still feel that way.
Yeah,
You know what I
like-
mean? If you still think this after hearing and understanding someone else's perspective, okay, cool. Well, then maybe that's your truth, I guess. But if you don't ever have that opportunity, and I mean, it's hard to do on your own. It's hard to have a conversation like this on your own because, again, you can only project
You
what
spin
you
your own
can.
gears. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So it's nice to have the bounce back on this.
See, and this is one of my other takeaways is like, even if I can't save the world, like some gangbanger's been beaten his whole life, I can't save the world. I can't save that guy, right? But maybe if I can just give a little hiccup in his worldview, that plants a seed that turns into a sprout, that turns into a vine of a potential new...
Well, and I think, I know I've seen it myself generationally through my family of do a little bit better, do a little bit better, do a little bit better. My version, was still shitty, and like my old man, like, well, I don't want to fucking be like this, and I wish I didn't scream and yell and throw things, but my old man beat the fuck out of me, and like, this is a step in the right direction. This is a little further
and his
away
old
from
man, like, what kind of
Yeah.
monsters were these guys,
Yeah.
right? Like, what
Yeah.
environment did these guys come from in order to be the
we have
people
to
that they
always
were?
remember too, like, I mean, when we think about like our grandparents and shit like that, we kind of like fictionalize it a little bit, like they did these things and they were great and they were thoughtful and they were caring and they were yep absolutely. But also, if you go back 4 generations, many were basically illiterate, many were fucking functioning addicts because that's just how you got through fucking life and society, especially through alcohol. You know what I mean? So when you have this, a bunch of barely educated people just working to get by and still doing the best they can and showing love where they can, there's a lot of fucking times over that falls apart.
Or even homesteaders and stuff like that, where you wake up at dawn, you till the field, you try to eat some food, you come in, you're beat, all you want is food and booze, so you have to do it again. Might have to put down a couple animals, so you got to be a motherfucker to some degree. And if the kids start being maniacs, well, they're gonna get a licking because that's all the energy I have for these guys.
I don't have time to fucking psychoanalyze this kid, man.
Yeah,
and figure
to
it
try
out.
and make
I got to
sure-
get back to tilling this field, and they got to help me too.
Yeah,
so.
you guys gotta
all these
carry these
beatings are going to
bales.
toughen you up a little bit while we're at it.
So that's a model. So, oh man, there's this thing I saw. It's like strong men create good times create weak men create bad times create strong men. And it's a cycle that's continually going where, and then like the funny thing is, where are we? Are we at the point right now where good times have created weak men and then everything falls apart and it's going to create hard times that necessitate a hard man coming back, which would be, unfortunately, the struggle towards might makes right, and those like the strong prevail.
Possibly, but it could also be a shift away from
That entire model.
Well, and away from taking advantage, doing it's acceptable within the system in the ways that I've manipulated the parameters, so I'm okay with it, instead of doing what is the morally right thing at the time. That's what strong men do. Strong men don't necessarily take advantage and manipulate and impose their will. Sometimes they just do the hard right thing at the time, and that's what pulls the
That's
rest
the
through.
dragon.
Well,
When you talk about
big
Joseph
fucking
Campbell's
exactly.
like fighting
Exactly.
the dragon is
Yeah.
doing the right thing. Even
And again,
though
when we're
it's much
saying,
easier
when I feel like
not
I'm
to.
saying man here, I'm picturing person. I'm picturing women. Women can slay fucking dragons. I don't want to get shit on for
mean,
this too.
humanity.
Well, in all honesty, that's true though, right? Like that's we've all got our shit. It's just the way it's been written about is that way.
All right, so we're almost near our day here.
I think so. Hey?
All right, love you. Thanks for coming out
Love
again.
you as well, my friend.
Yes. Thanks,
Also, fucking look us up on Spotify and Facebook and Instagram and
Vimeo.
fucking Vimeo. Yeah, check out the video, check out the audio, share, like, all those sort of things.
We'll
We
figure out
appreciate
some
it.
sort of stuff, some giveaways if you share our shit.
Oh,
That'd be
shit.
interesting, Figure something like that out.
Yeah, maybe the clothes we're wearing.
Blowjobs.
Oh shit! All right, yeah, I'm on board. Oh,
Yeah.
giving away?
No.
All right, all right.
Fucking right. Oh, you mean not receiving? I'm not
All
sure
right,
if I'm
fine,
down with
well,
that.
You know,
All right.
gotta do what you gotta do.
All right. Have a good one. See you next week
Bye.
or week or two. Bye-bye.